Yeah, so we're here today to talk about the state of serverless. In case you're not familiar with Datadog, we have the big purple booth with the super cute dog logo just behind you there.
And the guy walking around in the t-shirt with the Datadog.
Datadog is a monitoring and security platform for cloud applications. We've been in the observability space for a very long time, but now we have a comprehensive portfolio of security products that they'd be very excited to demo any of over there. You can even get a personal demo from Darwin here. He'd be happy to give you a demo.
I think one thing to call out, it is an interactive session. Feel free to just stop us anytime you want, ask a question about serverless. Feel free to just drop in. It's like we want to keep it as interactive as much as we can.
Yeah, small and personal.
Yes.
Because we're all here. There's not very many of you. Feel free to interrupt us. I didn't do the lead-in this time. We actually co-chair the CNCF's Serverless Technology Advisory Group together. So we're in a bit of a unique position because we get to get this feedback from great industry experts. One of our contributors is actually right over there, John Ziola.
The guy with the big guns. That's the guy with the big guns.
For this report, this is a report that's generated by Datadog every year. We actually take all of the telemetry from all of the customers in Datadog that use our serverless observability products. We anonymize metrics from it, and then we like to look at trends across the entire industry. And that doesn't just necessarily mean AWS. It's all the major cloud providers, how people are using serverless, and kind of what some of the surface area looks like. So we actually already delivered this report earlier online. I was actually part of that live stream. But we're going to put a security spin on some of these facts today and hope to have a bit of a conversation with you.
So that's my role over here, working as a CISO, putting a bit more practical spin to the research that has been there over here.
So the first fact here, I think, is kind of unsurprising if you've worked in the cloud space for a long time. Lambda, AWS Lambda has been around for a little while, and we all know that it's seen great adoption. This graph here says over half of organizations have adopted serverless, and that's across all three clouds. So you can see AWS is the clear market leader, but Google and Azure functions are also relatively prominent.
Out of curiosity, how many people are running serverless at this point in time? Oh, quite a few. In multiple clouds or one cloud, multiple cloud? Multiple cloud, wow. Oh, great to have you folks over here. We can talk about all the problems later on. Yeah, so I think that kind of adds on to it. So we were initially only in one cloud, but then there was a merger and acquisition happened, and then someone else came in. They were using some other cloud. So I guess the point being, when we ran the session just before, there were a lot of people who kind of got the other cloud because of mergers and acquisition, not by choice. I don't think there was by choice, but hopefully it was by choice for you folks.
So this is just a kind of an interesting fact, because even if you have serverless, or you don't think that you have serverless, you probably do have serverless, right? It's really, really easy for folks to turn things on in your environment, like for a serverless cron job, or maybe they deploy a CloudFormation stack set, or they're just doing a little bit of data processing. So at some point, the fact that serverless has kind of permeated all of your environments becomes a bit of an observability problem. Like, how do I know that I'm running serverless functions? What's the attack surface of those serverless functions? And that's kind of what we're going to look at as we step through the rest of the facts. Second fact here sort of highlights what the popularity of various languages is across the function set that we sampled. As you can see, Python is the clear front-runner language for serverless. Even though it's only the front-runner by a little bit, Node.js is not far behind. And then you have kind of a relatively steep fall-off after that of either compiled languages or what I would think of as enterprise languages.
I think the security thing over here for me was, for people who probably are still looking at supply chain, Python was like, if you know PyPy, which was more recently came out, there was like an open source vulnerability. They had to put on mutual TLS to make sure that some of their more critical libraries were not, I guess, tampered with, because a lot of people are using open source. Same with Node.js, people who work with NPM packages, very well known for having a lot of vulnerabilities in their open source packages as well. I think the one thing I'll probably ask, and I should have asked in the beginning, how many people use serverless for backend or full stack? Backend only, or Sweet? What about full stack? Everything is serverless. Is there? Or Curtis is, John is, anyone else full stack? Sweet. I mean, yeah, so we kind of have the same mix in our life as well, where I guess one half is primarily security functions, which are backend, and we started off with a .NET company, so everyone's doing .NET, but merger and acquisition happened. Then we got Java because they were using Java, so now we have multiple languages, which probably leads to the next slide.
Yeah, so you might say to yourself, hey, if I'm building my microservice application on top of serverless, I could safely assume that I'm probably doing that in a standard language, and that's normal, and I probably only have a language in my environment. And if you said that, you would definitely be incorrect, because the majority of large organizations are actually deploying Lambda functions in at least 3 languages. At least 3. So this was kind of a surprising fact to me. And actually, you could see even 5% down there are deploying in 6 or more languages.
Talk about observability. We kind of spoke about one of the challenges that we had with multiple languages, even though we were .NET shop and got Java on board, we kind of realized that, I mean, one, visibility into what the functions were doing, whether it's back-end or front-end or whether it's full stack, getting visibility into that was a challenge, but then we found out that even though we were a .NET shop and a Java shop, some people liked TypeScript more than Node.js, and there were all these other languages that we found. Definitely did not hit the 5 number, but most of the conversations we had with other CISOs definitely validated the point that the OWASP top 10, as they talk about it, it was very widespread for us in terms of security. It's not just about focusing on the language you had. We had to kind of expand onto other languages which we technically not trained our staff for. So that was the challenge we had from a security perspective.
I think one of the great things about serverless, right, is that we literally just get to write code, and then we put it in the serverless function, and then it carries out the sort of business logic that's part of the job that we want to achieve, right? So maybe part of the language diversity is actually that engineering teams are just choosing kind of the right tool for the job. But as a security engineer, of course, the increased attack surface means that now we have more software bill of materials to care for, we have more execution environments to care for. Now we have different types of code that we need to be auditing, whether we're using SAST or DAST or whatever. So this really does kind of highlight the need for serverless observability through your entire organization. Which is a nice segue to the next fact here, which is all about how Lambda functions are executed. So API Gateway is responsible for over half of all Lambda function invocations. And this one was actually a bit surprising to me, that the majority of folks that we studied are actually using serverless to provide web services. They're not doing asynchronous batch processing. They're not using step function workflows. They're just making APIs, which is awesome, but a little bit surprising.
Yeah, I think one thing, we went to RSA, for people who would have gone to RSA a couple of months ago, one of the themes that came out was that API security is probably the most misunderstood thing, even at this point in time. Especially because a lot of organizations, I mean, I can use an example of our organization. We were monolith, digital transformation happened, started going into API, more microservices. Similar to how there's a lot of microservice can be a problem, a lot of API is also a problem. Discovering what APIs you have is a problem. What an API is actually doing is a problem for us as well. So the API security, and even though the fact is about API gateway, and for backend functions, you would imagine a lot more people use Amazon EventBridge for it. But we obviously, being more microservice friendly and more microservice forward, we found that a lot of the conversations we were having about API security was a lot more different to, say, some of the cloud providers were talking about. For us, when we would talk to them about, hey, we have an API security challenge, we'll be thrown the example of a WAF. But technically, it's not really probably a HTTP problem, because that's not what APIs are all about. APIs are not doing HTTP. So that, and then we were told about DDoS. So we kind of realized there's a lot of misunderstanding between what API security should be and I guess what people are thinking it is covered. So I think I'll probably add on to that. That's part of our observation from the API gateway piece. The more we got into it, the more API security became a challenge, but we couldn't find a great solution to kind of solve that problem as well.
Yeah, when I look at this and I think about APIs and microservices, I think about the denial of wallet attacks or the resource exhaustion attacks, because if you just have API gateway open to the web, it's very, very possible that somebody can just invoke that function so many times that it either runs out of the reserved concurrency or it runs out of the unreserved concurrency, and it can kind of denial of service your entire account. So when you build these things up as public-facing REST services that have all this public attack surface exposure, you really have to think what your security strategy is for that. Are you putting a WAF in front of it? Are you putting CloudFront in front of it?
Yeah. Does anyone know what denial of service attack is on a serverless? You guys know denial of service? One gentleman does, I think. Kind of. So for context, because most of the serverless functions are triggered on the internet, you send a request, and it runs on this infrastructure that's behind the scene. The denial of wallet attack is more because you can keep invoking the function without any control. It's not DDoS really if it's still within the limit. So you can keep invoking a Lambda function until, I guess, your billing department or finance department gets an alert, hey, we just got a bill of $5,000, what's really happening? And you kind of go down this, not that it has happened with someone I know, but if it was to happen, the finance team reaches out to you and you kind of have to dig in and find out what's triggering this, and you find out, oh, actually, it's a Lambda function being triggered by someone on the internet just because there was a vulnerable application running over there. So that's a denial of wallet. Basically, you're being denied access to what you should be, your bills should be, but instead what you're getting is a lot more than what you should have. So that's what denial of wallet is.
All right. So the next fact, I think, is not going to surprise you at all, which is that the majority of Lambda functions actually are single-purpose functions. They're not monolithic functions. And what we mean when we say monolith is that somebody has lift and shifted something like a Django application or a Ruby on Rails application and just taken an entire ORM and mashed it into a Lambda environment. But since Lambda is born in the cloud and microservices are born in the cloud, unsurprising that the majority of functions are actually single purpose.
Monoliths, I think you had a great example earlier about who uses monoliths for serverless. Has anyone hijacked a monolith? Well, you can share your story about the Flask thing that you mentioned. We had anyone heard about Cold Fusion? Oh, somehow. So we had Cold Fusion. I love it. Yes, it still exists. It's still out there. People use it for serverless as well. And I think you had a Flask example earlier.
Yeah, you can take anything now with the custom runtime in Lambda, and you can actually create an entire runtime environment for any language. In fact, a number of fintechs were very, very excited the first year that this was released at reInvent because it made their old COBOL code brand new again. I don't know if anybody's willing to admit that they run COBOL inside of serverless, but I actually am amazed and terrified that this can live on. So the next fact here, I don't know if you consider this amazing or a little bit scary, which is that we're really seeing rapid adoption of using Docker containers as the delivery for the runtime itself. So I think it was one year ago, maybe 2 years ago, this was a feature that was released that now instead of using a zip file or a Lambda layer, or taking the off-the-shelf execution environments, you can actually just package up a Docker container, and you can bring a Docker container to the same micro VM that runs and executes the code.
As much as Andrew was excited about the announcement, I was a bit nervous just because for me, serverless was about moving forward. I didn't have to think about patching or think about servers in general, so I could just get away with my report saying, well, we don't need patching because we have serverless. But for me, the whole introduction of container mean we just went a step back because that opened up the possibility for people who don't use containers or probably have some context. The whole concept of image download, your container can have an image which is downloaded from a Docker Hub, which is a quote-unquote a public resource, which could have anything, any library that you probably have no access to, and your developers can download it. Now, I'm not trying to create a fear, but it's just more of the context that now that whole initial pitch that we were given about serverless, that, well, once you have it, you don't have to worry about servers or patching, but now we've kind of opened up another door for, I have to think about not just my OWASP top 10 for the code that I've written for Lambda, but I also have to think about my containers, where the image is coming from. Do I have a private image or is it a public image? What kind of libraries are there? Or is it even possible for me to have a container that is private to myself that I can access? So supply chain became a thing, basically, for people who are in that supply chain space. Like, now suddenly Lambda is in scope for supply chain as well. That was my intake over there.
I think the fact that you can use Docker here is exciting because we're consolidating on Docker kind of as an industry on the container runtimes. So the developer tooling around scanning and kind of protecting these things is only going to get better and better the more we kind of consolidate on it. So I actually see this as kind of a win for security.
Maybe this is how Cold Fusion got popular, because someone just said, Cold Fusion is great, guys.
So our final fact here, and we're happy to take questions from you, by the way, any time, especially at the end of the presentation. If you have any questions in general about serverless security or about the data, happy to answer those. But the final fact is that if you already are using Lambda, you are much more likely to adopt other no maintenance or low maintenance services on AWS. So there's a very strong correlation here with users that use ECS Fargate and users that use Lambda. And this is relative to users that use ECS on top of EC2, where you would have more options, more management responsibility. Customers that use Lambda love to shift more of that responsibility to the cloud provider.
Anyone using Fargate?
Fargate users, yeah.
Oh, nice. And you're using serverless as well? It's one person using oh, there you go, 2 people. Maybe we need to check the stat again.
Yeah.
But I think from our perspective, we definitely had, I need to step away from this thing. Yeah, there you go. So ECS Fargate was definitely where we started, but we went down the path of ending up having a lot of tech debt, which is why we kind of had this transition period. I kind of looked at ECS Fargate as a transition period in the beginning. At least that's what the organization thought. But we ended up having a lot of tech debt in ECS, which we never moved on to serverless, and we're still trying to work towards it. So I don't know if anyone else relates. I've got a few people who relates to this. It sounds like a great idea, but you definitely create a lot of tech debt as you kind of walk along the path. So on that note, if anyone has any questions.
Yeah, we're happy to take questions.
Serverless.
All the data is available there at the link on screen, along with a recording of the full readout of the report, if you're interested.
Anyone wants to bitch about serverless as well, they're welcome. Oh, well, you guys are too nice, by the way. So too nice. No one wants to talk about their sad stories about using serverless. We can talk about it later on as well. Any questions? Going once? Going twice?
We'll be around.
There you go. There you go. There's another question. Oh, sorry. Wait, let's get you a mic, man.
Sometimes somebody just appears with a mic.
Yeah. It's pita bread. Okay, good to know. It's not naan. It's pita bread.
But is a pita a taco? I mean, that's the debate. Is a pita
that's
a
the
form
debate
of
we've been
taco?
having. Like pita, taco, is it really a sandwich? Because but someone got upset at us when we were trying to have this conversation. So, but thank you. Thanks so much for that. Any serverless questions on making pita sandwiches?
We'll be around after the session too, kind of on the side here. If you just want to shake hands and say hi, great
Take
to meet
pictures,
anybody.
Totally do that.
Yeah.
Thanks so much for your time, everyone. Thank you.
Thanks again.
Thanks so much.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you, gentlemen.